When I went to the studios for the first time, I had never been exposed to like movie sets and television sets and radio and stuff. All that the first time I stepped in the park, maybe it was subconsciously, but it was what triggered me to know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
That was Skipper Ben Rebstock talking about the original Disney MGM Studios. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here on episode 98 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. First of all, I just hope you're all healthy and safe. I know it's an unprecedented, crazy time, like nothing else that basically any of us have experienced, but we're going to get through it. I have to believe that, despite challenges to health and society, people getting sick, people losing their jobs, so much. Just have to try and think that there's something great at the end of all of this. I hope you're all staying home. I promise I won't get on my soapbox, but please take the virus seriously. Stay home. We'll all get through this. Some point down the road, we'll all be enjoying theme parks and our lives again and far into the future. My guest today is Skipper Ben Rebstock. This is the second time I've talked with him. Ben, of course, was a longtime contributor on Inside the Magic with Ricky Brigante. We talked last year in January about how he got into Disney and the college program, his work on the Jungle Cruise, Muppet Vision 3D, and so much more. We dig even further this time, a little more about the Jungle Cruise, plus why he loves Disney MGM Studios like you heard in the original clip. We also talk about some newer things like his experiences riding the Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure and how cool that was. A lot of fun things. Ben's always cool to talk with. He has an interesting perspective as someone that worked for Disney but also now is a fan and also a podcaster on Marty Called. So it's always cool to get his perspective from the inside, but also now as someone who loves the parks. It was a lot of fun to talk with Ben, and I hope that I get a chance to talk with him again in the future. Before we get to that podcast, I wanted to again mention that my 100th episode is getting so close, 2 episodes away. I'd love to have you, the listeners, involved in this podcast. So if you have any questions, I'm going to do a Q&A portion. It can be about the podcast and its history. It can be about me. It can also be about the parks, what I think about the past, what's happening now, the future with expansions, what I'd like to see happen in the parks, almost anything. Submit your questions to me. You can send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. You can also send me a note on Twitter, TomorrowSoc, Facebook, Instagram, wherever. I would love to get your questions and try to incorporate them into the ultimate show. If you can submit those questions by Monday, April 6th, that'll make sure that they come in time to get on the show. Well, like I mentioned at the top, it is a crazy time right now, but I find that what makes me feel better is listening to podcasts, connecting with friends, talking about things I love like theme parks, and I think this podcast episode definitely applies. It's just fun to think about the things that we love to do, especially when things in the world are so crazy. So here is Skipper Ben Rebstock. It's a blast to, after listening to you for so many years, and of course now enjoying you guys talk away on Marty Called, and it's fun. So I like it. So it's always fun to talk. And so let's start a bit with a topical question. Both of us are basically self-quarantined right now in our houses, which gives us time to talk about this. But, it's a challenge. I know a lot of listeners are doing this to hopefully keep the virus from spreading. But so what have you been doing? How have you kept yourself busy in terms of at home just when you have more time?
Well, this couch that I'm talking to you from right now has been getting a lot of use the last several days. Haven't gotten up from it much, but now luckily I can do all my work with my current job from home. So it's been a mixture of getting my work done and then spending time with the kids and watching a lot of Netflix and watching a lot of YouTube. We did that beforehand anyway, watching a lot of Disney videos on there. I've actually found a nice channel and introduced my girls to the classic Disney Channel show Walt Disney World Inside Out that they've gotten a kick out of. So the other day we were watching about the construction of the Tower of Terror, and it's kind of fun actually getting to watch some of those clips and talking to my girls about how back when I was their age, we would get a show on the Disney Channel once every month that would talk about Disney World for 30 minutes because they're so spoiled by getting to hop on and, just hop on YouTube and watch every POV ride video they can think of. I was like, information back then wasn't as abundant as it is now for you guys. This is what I enjoyed. So we've been just kind of, everybody's been settled down. The girls have been excellent. And we've actually enjoyed our time we've been spending together. And I'm glad that you and I are getting to hop on here and have a discussion and talk a little Disney, because I think we all could use a little, break from the news and everything that's going on. So hopefully the two of us can provide some people with some enjoyment for the next hour or so to take their minds off things for a little bit.
Well, definitely. And I think that's, when I hesitate and I think, I'm doing a podcast about Disney and there's so many things going on, but I agree, at least for me, when I listen to other shows or other things or watch YouTube videos, that's a good way for me to kind of calm the nerves and the anxiety. And especially I have two girls at home, and same sort of deal where, we've watched all types of random POVs of rides, but also, there are some great retro channels that are just, I hate to say retro, it makes me feel old, but you know what I mean? It's like going back.
We are old.
Going back to all those things from the 80s and 90s and all that. So it's been really fun. Well, I'm excited to talk with you. And the first thing I want to talk about is I know that you were lucky enough to ride Hagrid's Magical Creatures at Universal. And I have not ridden it. I've heard lots of things about difficult lines and things not working, but I'd love to hear about your experience doing that because I haven't really talked about it with anyone on the podcast yet.
Yeah, we've discussed it on Marty Called a little bit, and even on there, I claimed it to be my favorite ride in Orlando right now, and it still stands there. Now, I have not been on Rise of the Resistance yet. I was hoping to go on that in a few weeks, which that has those plans have changed, so hopefully later in the summer or fall, we'll get to experience that. But as far as it's one of two rides, I feel like, in Orlando where you just get off with the biggest smile on your face. And the other one is Flight of Passage for me over at Animal Kingdom. And this is the roller coaster equivalent of it at Universal. No matter what the issues are with you waiting in line or having to get up early to go ride it or waiting for hours to finally get on there, whatever those issues are, they're all wiped away when you get strapped in on that motorcycle and take off on the ride, because it's just a magical experience. The interaction with the audio animatronic figures and the way they just create speed on that coaster. That's the one thing I keep telling people, that based on any of the videos you watch and stuff, you can't really account for how they simulate the speed of riding on a motorcycle. The track is so low to the ground and you're hugging everything like you were, actually out riding a bike. They did such a great job with that just experience, and then marrying that with the show scenes and doing the things that we had never done before, especially when you go into the Forbidden Forest and you have the track drop and the track switch and the acceleration again. It's my favorite ride in Orlando right now, as it stands. I haven't done a few of the new stuff, but if you ask me, the one thing I would go out of my way to experience if I had time to do one thing, it would be Hagrid's. I absolutely love that attraction. And the thing I like about it the most is it looks beautiful. Like the area that they retrofitted from Dueling Dragons and Dragon Challenge, it looks beautiful now, but there's so much greenery and foliage out there that once all that grows in, I can't wait to see what this ride's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to age really beautifully in that area of the park.
Yeah, I was so excited when I heard they were going to do that. I liked Dragon Challenge because they were just really cool coasters and pretty smooth and fun. But I remember going to Hogsmeade the first time, and you see Hogwarts and whatever, and you look over and you see those coasters, and while they're impressive, it's still kind of like, well, that kind of looks like we just got dropped into Six Flags a bit. They do the best they can. So to see them do something so themed, it seems really exciting. But I'm still impressed to hear how much you enjoy it. And so I'm curious too, because I think about a roller coaster, which I know this isn't like going 70 miles an hour, but it goes pretty fast, and you're going by all these sets and the animatronics. Like, how good of a chance do you really get to look at them? I haven't watched the POVs specifically because I don't want to be all spoiled on everything, but I know the basics about some of the animatronics and everything. Do you get a good look, or is it more just kind of like the overall experience you're getting?
You definitely get a good look at it, but you will find that you see things new each time you ride it, especially when you go into the Forbidden Forest area of the attraction. But the cars, like the first time you go into the hut, see Hagrid and the creatures in there, it does slow down very slow, so you get a really good look at everything that goes on in that room. But even, riding on multiple times, you do catch different things each time, so it has a really good re-ride factor from that. I do remember getting off the first time and talking to Lisa, like, hey, did you see that? I didn't see that. Well, you got to go back and ride it again to see that. So I love an attraction that'll do that for you, where not everything's just laid out for you and put in front of you on a silver platter. You've got to go back and look around and check everything out time and time again to get the full experience.
Well, that's great to hear, because that's something you want. That's, to me, one of the big benefits of even older attractions like a Pirates or Haunted Mansion or something like that, where you have so much going on that you get to ride them over and over and see that. And plus then you add in the thrill factor. I think it's a brilliant move by Universal to do something like that, especially, given now that more recently they seem to be doing a better job with the operations. I know it was a struggle, like we've seen with Rise of the Resistance and others. These really complicated attractions are having that. But I think, did you have a lot of challenge getting on the attraction even when you went? Because you went pretty early on, I think, after it opened.
We did. And the first time I rode it, the day the attraction was closed all day long. There was a major break in the attraction. There was something physically broke that they had to get in there and fix. We didn't think we were going to ride at all. I have a friend who might have had some insider information that gave us a little idea that if the ride was to get back up, he would kind of let us know and we could haul over to the other side of the attraction, other side of the park to do it. It was like 2 hours left to go in the park, with the parks being open. Both IOA and the studios were closing at the same time. And by that point, I was like, there's no way they're reopening this thing and we're going to ride tonight. And I had been given a little tip that if they could get it fixed, they were planning on extending the park hours at IOA a little bit to give some people time to go over there and ride it. It's like, all right, cool. I still don't have my hopes up real high. And my daughters, over the last couple trips to Universal, have become huge fans of the horror makeup show, which makes me very proud because I absolutely love the horror makeup show. And so we were going over to see the show, and we were going to see the final show at night, which happens at 8 o'clock for a 9 o'clock closing, 8 or 8:15. And so we go over there and we sit down at 8:15, and literally right when we sat down, I get this buzz in my pocket that says, get over there now. And so I look at my girls, I'm like, oh no, this is their favorite thing in the world. So I let them sit there for a few minutes. And then I was like, if you guys really want to ride Hagrid's, we got to go now. And their eyes lit up big. And so we snuck out the side door and went as fast as we could over there, got in line, and we got to go on it that night. So we got to go on it that time was 2 times because it broke down at one point during the ride for us. And Universal's been great that if you do not get the full experience on the attraction, if it stops at any point for any reason, when you get back into unload, they'll give those riders the option to hop back into the little side area and get back on the ride and ride again. So we had a small stop in our first ride, which was not enough for the ride to be to have any issues with our experience. We stopped maybe for 10 seconds. It was nothing. So we get back to unload and they're like, hey, because it stopped, do you guys want to ride again? And we're like, are you serious? Of course we want to ride again. So we got back in line. The second time we did it, it was a perfect experience, and we absolutely loved it.
Wow, that's a fun story. I'm glad you had that info. That was good.
Yes.
It was hard to get on. I swear. So I'm interested. You mentioned Flight of Passage, which I rode for the first time just last fall. and I thought was incredible. I was kind of skeptical because it was so screen based, but blew me away, made me so happy to ride it. And then you have Universal doing Hagrid's, which is a physical set, it's a coaster, kind of not, I hate to generalize. Both Disney and Universal have lots of difference, but going according to what a lot of people say, there's a lot of screen-based attractions at Universal. So I'm curious now, though, they seem to be switching things around a little bit that way. And now they're going to have this entirely new park at some point called Epic Universe. I mean, what do you think? I know we don't really know much. Do you think they're going to stick more with doing things with sets and less screen-based? Because I know they've made announcements that way. After writing Hagrid's, does it seem like a model for a lot of things they might do in the future?
I would say it's probably going to be like 50 on that, because if they're going to do something like I can easily see them doing some screen-based attraction based on How to Train Your Dragon that's very similar to Flight of Passage. But at the same time, the success of Hagrid's, and then you look at Universal Hollywood with their new Secret Life of Pets attraction that is no screens whatsoever and just full with audio animatronic figures in it. I kind of feel like they see the value in not going extremely screen-based heavy and having that nice balance of both. Because at the same time, you look at things like Spider-Man, which has been around forever and it's still fabulous. And it's screens all over the place that are mixed in perfectly with the physical sets, but the majority of that attraction that you're experiencing is the stuff that's happening in front of you on those screens. So there's nothing wrong with using screens, and even if they open an entire theme park full of screens, if it's on the level of a Spider-Man or a level of Flight of Passage, we're all going to love it. We're all going to experience it and have a blast with it. But I do think that we'll see them, finding that perfect balance of both, because the stuff that they've done with Harry Potter and the other areas with Gringotts and Forbidden Journey, a lot of screens in both those attractions. So if they do have a Fantastic Beasts section, you would think, yeah, probably they're going to do another attraction that's similar to those two as opposed to another Hagrid's. That's just my gut feeling. It seems like those other two attractions kind of went off without a hitch, and if it ran pretty solid over the years, considering they still have some issues with Hagrid's. And again, that's way more on the manufacturer of it, and that's them trying to push the limits, really. If you sit back and look at the problems that they're having and how many cars they're trying to load on that thing at one time, and how the load and unload, which is one thing you'll experience the first time you do it, the cars do not stop when they go into the load area. You're on a conveyor belt right next to it, and they just keep moving. And that's where they have issues, is if there's any hiccup in that load or unload process, it just kind of triggers everything throughout the ride. So it's stuff that they'll get figured out and they'll balance perfectly. But yeah, I think the new park, there's a really good shot that it's kind of more on the 50-50 side and not going extremely screen-based heavy like Universal had gone for like the last 10 years. They used a lot of screens. We'll just put it that way. And I think they're seeing the value now of having those physical sets with some of their latest stuff that's going on, which I'm super excited. I don't know if you've seen the photos from the Secret Life of Pets ride, but I'm super excited to see how that ride turns out in Hollywood.
Yeah, I admit I haven't looked as much into that just because I had the movies and the property. I'm just going, oh. But the fact that you mentioned, I didn't even realize for sure that it was all animatronics, but I need to look more into that. But in general, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, it's easy for me. I wanted to ask the question, but the things you mentioned, like Spider-Man is incredible even before they did the upgrade on the screens. And, I even think I have not done Rise of the Resistance yet either, but I went to Galaxy's Edge before that was there. But just from what I'm hearing, when it's running, the mix of animatronics and screens is incredible, like mind-blowing. So I think your point about pushing the envelope, I think, is both of them are doing, where they're trying to top either each other or themselves. And the challenge there is, of course, like we saw with the Rise of the Resistance still, that it's going to lead to downtime because it's just so on the edge.
What they can do with screens now, and then you get into like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway with the projection mapping, that they can just bring a new depth and level. The quality is so amazing. Again, Flight of Passage, you're literally in front of a movie screen, but you get lost in that film. You feel like you're on Pandora. You feel like you're flying. It takes you like 2 seconds to completely forget that's a screen in front of you. that's the quality and the level and just the resolution, essentially, if you want to get on the, the technical side of it. It can bring so much realism and depth to an attraction that it, a physical set just frankly can't do. I can't even imagine Rise of the Resistance with the big windows that look out into space. If it didn't have those high quality screens pulling that off, I don't know if we'd be, as excited about that attraction if it was just a black wall with some lights. And I don't know how they would do that, how you would pull off the depthness of space without using the screens the way they did. So I am not opposed to screens being used and being very important driving factors in any new attraction.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's even you see it with a boat ride like Navi River Journey or something where a lot of that is not physical effects, but you're still moving through a space. And I think that's the biggest part with a lot of this is, I mean, Flight of Passage being kind of an exception because it took me a while to look over and see the other people and be like, oh yeah, we're all up here. It's crazy. Which and even Forbidden Journey where you look behind you and you're like, what kind of weird robot is carrying me around right now? It's nutty. So there's so many things they can do right now. But I do want to shift a bit because, of course, you were a Jungle Cruise skipper. And I have to ask a really obvious question. So recently there was of course, news that one of the ships had some issues and started taking on water. So did you experience anything like this because you were there, different era, no Twitter, no all those things, the news didn't travel. Did you have things like this happen when you were working as a skipper?
No, not like that. Now, I did get an entire boat just completely drenched one time because we got caught in the middle of a storm out by the Savannah scene, and I was not quick enough to pull the tarps over that cover you to protect you. So yes, I came back with a boat full of completely drenched guests, but that was not a man error. That was an act of God. That happened in that occurrence. We talked about it in the last Marty called, and Tim asked me, "Hey, how did that happen?" I was like, "I have no freaking idea how that happened and how it happened so fast." It had to be something underneath where it was taking on water, and then the weight of the boat just combined with whatever water it was taking on just finally hit that breaking point where it started sinking. At some point it looked like it was off the track to where so they could unload closer to the edge of the grass over there. But I mean, they've done a great job of kind of covering up exactly what happened, and there wasn't a ton of video and a ton of clear video or photos that came out. So kudos to Disney for covering that up as quickly as they could. But no, I never had anything close to having a boat sink out there in the jungle, and that's even I drove the old boats and the new boats, and I just can't fathom a world where that happens. So I'm still very baffled by what exactly went on that day.
Yeah, it's crazy because it seems like they've had just a lot of, and this is setting aside the closure for the coronavirus, but even before that, which sounds like 100 years ago almost, but they were having a lot of issues, the people who were crashing and all that. But I was curious too, just, when you were there, and I'm not trying to get any secrets or whatever, but when you were trained, I mean, did they give you any real tips for like something this extreme? Like, did you know, or was it more like you were just going to have to kind of work on the fly for something like this?
Oh, something like that. You're working on the fly. You had signals with the gun and stuff and radios to, like, if you had an issue, like the biggest thing that you had to worry about was your boat dying out on the jungle. And if that happened, had a radio back to have somebody come tie you up and pull you back in. No, as far as like there's definitely nothing in the manual that says if your boat starts sinking, do this and do that. That's not in there at all. They do talk to you about if a guest or a skipper were to fall in the river. We had stuff that happened on there, and I've always said the story about you if you got into the river, fell in the river whatsoever, you were taken over to Epcot and got a free tetanus shot as part of your Disney experience. And we had that happen. Looking back on it, there was a skipper fell off the dock, and then at one point a guest stepped in the river. They didn't fall all the way in, but their foot went about a little bit below the knee, went into the river. That's the only two times while I worked there that I have any occurrence of anybody getting in the water while we were there. So, and luckily that was not me. I wasn't the skipper that fell in the water. But we did some pretty stupid things that we could have probably fallen in the water at some point, but we used to, I know I've told the story back on Inside the Magic back in the day. We used to, back when we had the old boats, you could pull this off a little better, but one boat would stop at the Savannah scene and another boat would pull up behind it. And we'd hug the nose to the rear of the two boats and the skippers would swap boats. And we did that to throw off the coordinator that's keeping track of what skipper's on what boat when we would pull back into the load and unload area. That was very frowned upon to do that, but we would do, skipper swaps is what we called it. And it was something just to kind of entertain ourselves. And the guests found it funny too, when you got halfway through and, it was almost like Great Movie Ride with somebody taking over your boat. But if you look back on those old boats and how it was, we easily could have fallen into the river at that point and, probably did something pretty stupid to put guests in maybe a little bit of danger at that time with nobody at the helm of either boat. But we were young and stupid. So, you get away with it, right?
Yeah. Well, that raises a good question too, because I think about it. And of course, the thought is, you're doing Jungle Cruise Skipper. That's the job that you get up there, you get to talk, you get to say jokes, you mix it up, but you do it over and over and over. Is there a point where like you can't keep it fresh, where it's just like so mundane and you're just kind of going through the motions? Or how do you kind of, beyond what you just told me, were you able to kind of keep it fresh where it didn't become like too dull? Or, because I've been on the Jungle Cruise and had some amazing skippers, and then a few times I've been on and I'm like, it's okay. And it makes a huge difference. So how do you kind of keep that going when you were there? Yeah,
I never had that issue, but that definitely happens. My favorite times during my shifts was being on the boat. I hated being like at load or unload or at greeter or outside doing strollers. That was the boring stuff to me. I loved being on a boat. So I would say at least 60% of the skippers, that's the other way around. They hated being on a boat. They wanted to be off on the dock and doing the easy gigs, because being on the boat is without a doubt the hardest gig there. It's just the one that drains you and takes the most out of you. But I loved, because it was like my dream job ever since I was a little kid, is what I wanted to do. So I looked at it as just an opportunity every time I was able to take a boat out. Now, if I would get past, where the Python is, if I'd get out to that point and nobody's laughing at the jokes just because it's a dead boat with the guests, and you'd have that from time to time where the guests are just looking for a place to sit down for 10 minutes as opposed to like really wanting to experience a ride. So you would get those boats that just were not into anything. That was enough to kind of make you drain and go, man, like, I don't want to put a ton of effort into the rest of this boat. So that's the only time that would happen. But whenever I was leaving the dock, I left the dock with the best intentions every single time, because that was just the highlight of my shifts every time. I would much rather have been there than been out on the dock and doing the other stuff where I wasn't getting to ham it up and tell jokes and have some fun.
Well, yeah, I know you mentioned the last time we talked just how much you wanted to do that job. So it was not something where you're just like, oh, they put me here. It was a really big deal for you. So, of course, I have to ask you the big question now, because with the Jungle Cruise, we have the new movie. I mean, who knows with releases and everything, but a new movie coming fairly soon with The Rock and Emily Blunt, called The Jungle Cruise. And I've watched the trailer, and I'm guessing you've probably seen it. What do you think about this, having this movie coming out?
Oh, I'm excited for the movie. I thought the trailer was good. I'm a big fan of The Rock. I think it'll be a fun movie. And basically with the cast that they have in it, it's got a chance, being a franchise for them, to be honest. But the thing that scares me the most is if the movie is extremely successful, how much of that's going to get incorporated to the attraction. I don't want to have to see that all the jungle skippers have to lift weights for 7 hours a day to get pumped like The Rock so they look big and buff at the front of the boat every day. That's a joke, by the way, because none of the skippers would ever dream to work out like that. But, I don't want to have a living with the land experience either, where there's no longer any skippers and we just have a voiceover of The Rock taking us through the river. So I think the movie's going to be great. I just hope that we get to keep our attraction as it is. If they want to mix in a little bit from the movie, I'm perfectly fine with that. But they don't tend to do things small anymore, especially behind an intellectual property that's a successful one. So we'll just kind of have to see how new management plays this all out.
So yeah, that was going to be my next big question, was because if you think about what they did with Pirates with Johnny Depp, they put him into the attraction and they added some of the other characters, but it was a fairly minor thing. It wasn't a huge shift to what the attraction was. I mean, I'm sure some purists would have a different opinion, but overall, it was not a huge adjustment. And then I look at the Jungle Cruise and I think, I don't know how much, because I would not guess that Disney would go far enough that they would actually not have a skipper on there doing jokes. It more likely, I guess it could be something where late in the attraction, then like something happens and you see the rocket. I mean, I don't know. It seems like whatever change they would make would have to be pretty dramatic to actually get the characters somehow involved. I mean, I doubt it would just be, oh, hey, there's Emily Blunt and the Rock over by the side or something, because he's supposed to be the skipper. How does that work?
If they were to do something and taking the skippers off, it would have to dramatically change the way that attraction runs. Now, while the skippers are not actually steering the boat, shock, shock, we do control the speed of the boat. And so it's not an automated attraction to where, it just takes off from the dock and then controls the speed itself to get back in. We actually throttle up and throttle down and can hold up if there's a boat ahead of us that's going a little bit slower or there's an issue on the jungle. So if they were to take the skippers off the boat completely, they'd have to rework all of those boats and the way that attraction ran. So, yeah, I think that's the drastic measure would be taking the skippers off, and I don't see that happening. But I could see something, back on the old Kilimanjaro safaris where they would the driver would talk to Warden Wilson Batua and have him incorporated into the spiel. That wouldn't shock me if the Rock was a floating voice throughout the ride that the skippers interacted with, and then maybe led to a payoff at the end where you saw a Rock audio animatronic at the end of the ride or something like that. I think that could happen, but again, it would take a pretty major reworking of how that attraction runs fundamentally, as opposed to just adding maybe a scene in the ride and adding a couple lines to the script, which would be probably the easiest and quickest addition of getting some of that stuff incorporated into it. So, and again, that's all dependent on this movie being successful whatsoever. It could come out and be like the last Pirates movie was, and everybody tries to forget it as soon as they can. But I think with The Rock in it, it has a pretty good chance of being pretty successful when it eventually hits theaters.
You would think so. I mean, again, there's always the backdrop of when are movies really going to be picking up again in terms of crowds and everything, and how that could be impacted. Because I know that hit the last Pixar movie, which came out right before kind of everything went down. So, but again, with the assumption of kind of a return to people going to movies at least close to what they were before, I think it does have a good chance of being popular just because I mean, The Rock, he's had some movies that, not to pick on them, but that were not the superstar movies, like his best ones, that still make a lot of money.
Yeah, they do.
It's your Skyscraper or San Andreas, whatever, that still do really well. So I don't know if they had the budget on this level, but yeah, there's a chance. So I guess we'll see.
And those movies do really well internationally, too, even though the international box office isn't talked about a ton over on this side. That's what the movie studios base all their judgments on these days, is just what's the worldwide gross. And The Rock is definitely, even his bombs here tend to do extremely well overseas. And that's why he gets so many leading roles. And I love the dude, too. So it's all good with me. He can star in every movie for all I care.
No, it's a good choice for them, too, because one, I think he's a likable guy. He tends to be able to play kind of a goofy lead, and even in a family-ish type movie. So I think it should work. All right. Well, let's talk about kind of the other big thing. I wanted to ask some questions because the Disney MGM Studios, of course, has changed so much. I mean, even since we last spoke in January of 2019, they opened all of Galaxy's Edge. They opened Smuggler's Run, Rise of the Resistance, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. A lot of things have happened there. But I want to go back kind of a little more to the original MGM Studios. We talked a lot last time about the Muppets and what you did there at Muppet Vision 3D, but I'm curious just in general. I know you mentioned about the park being so important to you, kind of similar to what a lot of people loved about Epcot Center. And I'm curious, just with that park being so front and center, what did that original park, why was that so important?
Oh, that's a good question. On a personal level, that park just kind of opened my eyes to a new world of something I'd never seen before. As much as I love the Magic Kingdom and even Epcot, there's enough. I wouldn't say necessarily Epcot on that side, but at least on the Magic Kingdom, there's enough amusement park in that park that, it is it kind of tags back to your like regional amusement parks. So while I live very close to Six Flags Over Texas and always have, and that park back years ago was themed very, very well, to the point that this is the trivia question I always like to play on everybody. What does Six Flags mean? The Six Flags actually means for the Six Flags that flew over Texas as the different countries that own this territory. So the original Six Flags Over Texas had areas themed around France, themed around Spain, themed around the Mexico, the cultures that had us. So theming to me kind of transitioned over when I would go to Epcot or would go to the Magic Kingdom as a kid. I was like, man, I love this place, and I loved it way more than I loved Six Flags, but it still had enough connection that it was somewhat similar. Whereas when I went to the studios for the first time, I had never been exposed to like movie sets and television sets and radio and stuff. All that the first time I stepped in the park, maybe it was subconsciously, but it was what triggered me to know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So getting to see those things firsthand just made my eyes so big. Getting to sign up, that was actually the first thing we always did once the studios opened, is before we'd go to the Magic Kingdom, before we'd go to Epcot, we would go to the Disney MGM Studios at the time. And at the very front of the park, by the entrance, there was a casting booth, and you could find out what shows were being filmed during that week, and you could sign up to be on those shows. It was Star Search, it was the new Mickey Mouse Club, it was wrestling, WCW wrestling. And the first thing we would do on every one of our vacations was to go there, sign up for as many shows as we could so we could be on a sound stage and be on television. We absolutely loved it. And so now the current park doesn't have that original intention to what it was, but what it's morphed into to where it houses a lot of these iconic properties that Disney now owns, I think it was a smart transition into that. I definitely wish it still had some of the old characteristics of the park, the talking about watching old YouTube clips. So we showed my girls the other day the old Superstar television, which it's definitely in my top 10 of favorite things that Disney ever did in a park. We would go see that multiple times a trip. We absolutely loved it. And then the Monster Sound Show with that one, still watching old YouTube clips makes me laugh every time, watching people try to put the Foley sound effects to the classic Chevy Chase and Martin Short movie and missing their cues every time. And it just makes me laugh and giggle every time I watch it. So losing attractions like that definitely hurts, but I like the direction that the park has now grown into, and I think will continue to grow into over the years to come.
Yeah, it's funny. Superstar television. We went the first year. I mean, my parents took me. I was a kid, but the first year in '89 was open, and then that would just happen to coincide with when we went. Some of the trips I remember pretty well, like '89, '90, '91, whatever, and seeing that park kind of change. But we did all those things so much. I mean, you're speaking to a celebrity here, because I was like Cheers bar patron number 4 once when I went. That was one time I went. I was in college, but that was fun too, because in a sense you missed the whole show. Yep. But the way they treat you, and they're like, "It's your turn," and they're like, I didn't have to wear a costume or anything because it wasn't like one of those. But it was watching all the hubbub behind it. I found that fascinating. The fact that they would take that effort to put all that together for a show like that. It was something like that. I think something like that, actually, I know they wouldn't do it, but I think that could totally still work today, because it's not, you just do different properties. It seems like it could still work.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, you're talking to a celebrity himself. I was on Gilligan's Island when I was there. But yeah, it's me and my sisters and 2 friends that we were all cast to be in Gilligan's Island. And it was highlight of the trip, literally highlighted the trip. My parents and their parents talk, for years about us being on that stage and doing that. And, it's not a roller coaster. It's not these amazing experiences they put together. It was a green screen and a boat set that looked terrible. And, it was just so amazing. And when you combine that, the other thing that really stood out to me was the you had the 2 tours, the backlot tour, which was the tram tour that stuck around for years, but you also had the backstage pass tour, which was they would warn you, this is a 2-hour walking tour. And my God, I loved it. I loved going in those catwalks and looking through those windows down on the sets of the shows that were filming. And as a kid, that just put such an impression on me that now I take it for granted that I walk on sound stages every day. But it all started because of those tours going, man, I want to make a career out of this. And luckily I was one that was able to do that. And it just left such an impression on me. That old park was so fun. And I think, I don't know if I told you this on the last episode, but like when my first job was at Muppets. I like how I'm Skipper Ben, which I kind of gave me myself that nickname on Inside the Magic, so I'm guilty of this. But yeah, I worked at Muppet Vision 3D far longer than I ever worked at the Jungle Cruise. My heart belongs to Muppet Vision 3D. And I remember when I first got that job, my first summer there in '99, I'm at the casting area and they're handing out all the positions. Like, oh, you're at the country club at the parks. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, everybody wants to work at MGM Studios. And I found out quickly why, just because of how the park was laid out. It has, especially back then, it's not like it all today, but back then it had a leisurely feel. You could move through that park slower than you could the other parks. You didn't feel like you had to run from attraction to attraction to attraction. And part of that was because of the length of some of those attractions. You had your time taken up for long periods of time between the tours. Between the Great Movie Ride was a long ride. Muppet Vision was a big part. You're there for nearly a half hour. It was just a slower, more laid back, people not going crazy park than you would experience, especially like at the Magic Kingdom. So I love that park. I could talk about that park for days and days and days. And to this day, it's when we go on our trips, it's my place to go. I love the other three parks, but I feel like I'm at home when I finally get to go to the studios, and I have to spend a certain amount of time there. I have friends that still work at Muppet Vision from when I worked there 20 years ago, and they opened the attraction 10 years before I ever worked there. They're still there that day to this day, and it's because anybody who's ever worked in that park, just they know that's the place to be.
Well, that's great to hear, and I could talk about it for a while. I think next time we're just going to be like, okay, let's just go through each attraction and rave about it for about 20 minutes. That's
totally down for that. I am down for that.
Put it on the board. We could go on because, and I did do that walking tour with, Mel Gibson and Pee Wee Herman and Bette Midler and just kind of oddest collection of people that kind of led you through that. But it was fun. And yeah. And I think of it, I think we went there, I was like 13. And, but the fact is, I remember going through, and yeah, because there was no DVD extra features and YouTube and all that, you were just like, wow, I get to see all these things that I wouldn't have seen. And now they couldn't do it the same way, but it's shifted so dramatically now into something that is cool, but in an entirely different way.
Yeah, and TV and stuff is just not produced the way it used to be back then. Sound stages and live audiences and like that. I do like how some of the shows it's almost again retro to go back to where a sitcom starts by saying it's taped in front of a live studio audience. People forget that every show used to be like that, and so I remember distinctly that. When I was younger, we were at a taping of the new Mickey Mouse Club, with Justin Timberlake and all the Britney Spears and all that stuff. So that was really cool. We got to go to a taping of that. We went to wrestling several times. That we were sitting in the front row, and my mom was acting crazy because we were told by the casting director, if you're not enthusiastic in the front rows, we'll move you to the top rows and move other people down. So we're like, Mom, we don't want to lose our front row seat. Get up and act crazy. And with the WWE network and their streaming network, they're starting to put some of those old shows on their service. And they used to tape a show called WCW Worldwide there, and they have not started putting those up yet. So when those go up there and I finally have footage of my mom acting like an idiot during a Ric Flair match, I'm going to clip that and I'll share it for everybody to watch, and we can all make fun of my mom together. She's going to love that. But one of the highlights that I had working at Muppets my first summer was one evening. At that point, all the sound stages were still there and they were still doing shows. And one evening, a manager came to me about an hour before close, and he said, "Hey, go bump out a rotation." And I was like, "Oh, why? I didn't ask to, leave early or anything." He's like, "No, go bump out a rotation. I need to take you somewhere." I was like, "All right, cool." I went and told everybody, "Hey, I'm out of rotation." And they were not happy because they actually had to, pick up another spot, especially near close when a lot of people are already off for the evening. And he took me off and we went over to the large sound stages where Toy Story Mania is at now. And at that time, a Mortal Kombat television show was filming inside there. And as we're walking in, he's like, "Hey, I saw that you're a radio, TV, film major in college. I wanted to make sure you had some time to go on a real television set." I was like, "You're freaking kidding." He's like, "No." And so he opened the doors. We went in there and I got to nobody. It was just the two of us on this massive, massive set that we just walked around. and I got to soak it all in and basically see television and movie magic firsthand. That was the first time I'd ever like personally been on and had an experience like that to see something on that level. And that was one of the cool things with the college program back then, where they would see what your majors were and they would try to give you experiences that fell in that line. My wife, she wanted to be in the hospitality business and worked in hotels after she graduated from business school. And during her time there, she got to go, spend days shadowing over at the Contemporary and things like that. They would actually give her shifts over there to just stand around and watch people and learn from people. And that was one of my experiences, getting to go on those sound stages. And it didn't hurt that I was, a major Mortal Kombat fan of the video games itself. And nobody's probably ever seen the TV show because I think it lasted like 8 episodes. But it was neat seeing that stuff firsthand and getting to experience that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I laughed because I didn't know there was a Mortal Kombat TV show. It's sad that you just told this really great story, and my mind goes to let's ask about the Mortal Kombat TV show. but no, that's great because it was so different, and like you mentioned, the way that things were shot and everything, and the fact that you were there at that time, it's super cool, especially given where your career went, like you mentioned. So I want to make sure to ask you a little bit about a few of the new things here. I know you mentioned you haven't done Rise of the Resistance, but with Galaxy's Edge coming in, I mean, it came in, last summer, and there was a lot of, there's no one there at Disneyland and all these things. And then now it's like, it was the opposite, where the past few months or so, where it was basically boarding groups and the whole deal. I mean, what do you think about what they did at Galaxy's Edge, and what kind of excites you about it?
You're hurting me, Dan. I thought we weren't going to talk about this because my trip in 3 weeks got canceled.
Oh, sorry.
We had it lined up. It was a father-son trip. We were going out for WrestleMania in Tampa, and that was on Sunday, April 5th. And the 4th, it was just going to be father and son time in Galaxy's Edge for the first time because I have not been there yet, and it's eating away at me like you wouldn't believe. My wife got to go to Disneyland about 2 months ago on a travel agent's seminar, and they got some exclusive tours of the area and the attractions, and she got to FaceTime with me, and it looked great, but I have not been able to get in there yet. But, I mean, from everything I've seen and from people that I trust on their opinions, that if something's not great, they'll say it's not great, and if something's great, they'll admit to it. And I really trust their opinions and value their opinions on it. And those people have come back with nothing but glowing reviews of the section and the area. And if anything, it's just the capacity that park has desperately needed. And honestly, we're not even close to being done. Between those 2 attractions opening, and I loved what they did with the Toy Story Land area. I really enjoy Slinky Dog Dash. I think it's a fantastic family roller coaster. And then you had the new Mickey and Minnie's going in. That park desperately needed the capacity. It needs more capacity. I think we're seeing that with the boarding groups, and it'll be interesting if the boarding groups come back when the parks come back online, because that was always supposed to be somewhat of a temporary deal. I can tell you, as somebody who is planning a trip a few weeks from now, I was not enjoying getting up every day and seeing how fast the boarding groups would be gone every morning as I was trying to plan how exactly we would get in there to get to try to ride this ride. And I don't know the right or wrong answer between a virtual queue and the actual standby line. I don't know what's better until they add more attractions in that park. I think they're going to have to do something with the virtual line, just because there's not enough things to take people away from that area. But I think they're doing a great job of reinventing that park, bringing some life to that park. I think the Mickey and Minnie's looks great. I wish we hadn't lost the Great Movie Ride, because that is one of my all-time favorites as well. I think that one could have been updated. I'm not saying that that ride didn't become dated over time, but I think they could have updated that easily with a lot of new films and films over the years that are in that Disney vault that have been very successful, and then done Mickey and Minnie's somewhere else to give even more attractions for people to do. But by all accounts and purposes, the addition of Star Wars looks fantastic. It feels like it fits in that park. It feels like it fits in that park better than it would fit in any other park. So I think they really nailed that one on the head. I don't know about Galaxy's Edge being added to Disneyland. I know they're struck by how much size of the land and where they can add and put things. But I think adding Star Wars, adding Toy Story, adding Mickey and Minnie to the studios the way they did makes a lot of sense. And frankly, I don't think we're done yet. I'm excited to hear what could be coming a little bit down the line. line for that park, because I think there's definitely areas that can be expanded upon or updated to make that park even more popular than it currently is.
Yeah, and I think you made a lot of good points there. I did ride Smuggler's Run, and I thought Galaxy's Edge to Land looked awesome, and even just seeing it with the one attraction, and then also got to do Toy Story Land for the first time, and it was really hot that day, so Toy Story Land could use some help with its shading situation. But I will say that I thought Slinky Dog was fun. I mean, it was actually a little more thrilling than I expected it would be.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what? This is a lot to take at 7 a.m. when I was there or something. But I agree. I was planning a trip to Disneyland with my daughters, and the boarding group thing was stressing me out, because it's just like, you think about it, and that might be a little easier because your hotel could be so close to the park where you could just got to get into the park. You can sign up or get the group and then go take it easy. But still, I wonder what it's going to be like. But just to kind of address what you were bringing up about future things, I mean, what would you know the park really well and kind of know where the areas are or what they could do. What would you like to see them do next? Because I feel like I agree with you about the Great Movie Ride. I think there have to be some people at Disney that may be kicking themselves and thinking, wow, all that capacity that we could have had added on would have been great. But setting that aside, I mean, what would you like to see them do next to kind of, because that park still needs more, like you said.
I think the lowest hanging fruit is, updating the Indiana Jones area. There's multiple extremely popular Indiana Jones rides all over the world. We're going to have a new Indiana Jones movie go into production next year. That franchise is not going anywhere. They own the property now. Put something in there. It doesn't have to be the Indiana Jones Adventure from Disneyland. You can do a brand new concept, but if you want to retrofit and maybe upgrade that one and make it maybe a new theme, but keep the same ride system, I think that's perfectly fine as well, because that ride is been around for decades and still extremely popular. So to me, that's the easiest one right now. Then you've heard things over the years. Are they going to add Cars? Maybe a Monstropolis? I think they could do another Pixar franchise in that area, and Monstropolis might be the perfect one to do. So you're not exactly copying Radiator Springs from the West Coast, but I would start with Indiana Jones and then go from there. Heck, even if they want to bring over that extremely popular Pirates ride from Shanghai Disneyland, it fits in this park. I don't mind having two Pirates rides, especially if the new one is as groundbreaking and amazing as the one that they put in over there. Sure, put that one in this park over, where the animation courtyard is, and go with that. So there's. The nice thing is there is some areas of that park that can be expanded upon. They do have a little bit of land to work with, so it'll just be interesting what they decide to do in those spots in the future.
Yeah, I would love it if they found some way to connect the park better, where you didn't have to go to one end and then go back to the other end. And I know that wouldn't really impact it by the Indiana Jones updates, which I also agree would be really cool. But I don't know, it might be too complicated to do. But if there was some way you could kind of go straight into the back and then somehow connect to where Tower of Terror and Rock and Roller Coaster are, because that's always, to me, what's so nice about parks that work the best, that, the hub and spoke or something like that, is you don't feel like you're backtracking. And the layout is always kind of been a bit tricky in that park with how much you kind of go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, you definitely can work behind the Star Wars launch bay now, and that area. If you were to open that area up, you can connect the end of where Tower and Rock and Roller Coaster are to easily connected over to Animation Courtyard now. That area, the only thing back behind launch bay right now, there's some office buildings, and there's the cast member cafeteria, which, I mean, it's not the greatest cafeteria in the world. They can easily tear that down and put one up somewhere else. That's a quick, easy fix. The end of Hollywood, the end of Sunset Boulevard really is kind of up right behind the launch bay building, and if you kind of cleared that out and retrofitted that area, you can make those two connect a lot easier. So, if you were able to walk from the end of Sunset Boulevard down one small path that actually got you over to the Toy Story area relatively fast, and that would be very nice in there.
Yeah, I just think it would also help with crowd flow, just given, with Galaxy's Edge. I mean, it does have the two entrances, which helps a bit, where everyone's not going in and out of the same spot, but there's still other ways they could do there. Well, there's tons more things I could ask, but I would love, Ben, to finish with some kind of oddball rapid fire questions, if that works for you.
Man, you didn't send me these early. I don't know if I'm going to answer these well.
I did that on purpose, let me tell you.
Oh.
I gotta keep you on your toes here, you know.
Oh, this makes me so nervous. All right, I'm ready for it.
Well, I promise these aren't trivia. I'm not asking for, this is like opinion kind of things. And they're not too much. All right, here we go. In an alternate universe where we were updating the Great Movie Ride, but we had to make some changes, and someone said, okay, you have to remove one of these 3 scenes. One of them has to go. Which one of these would you choose? And I promise it's not Footlight Parade. That would be too easy. Okay. Alien, The Wizard of Oz, or the Mary Poppins scene?
The Wizard of Oz. And that one, we kind of had a discussion this on Marty Called, where we each came up with ideas to update the Great Movie Ride. And for me, as much as I love that Wizard of Oz scene, it's just the one that gives you the most space to do something really cool in there. My opinion was to do something with Toy Story. I would have loved, I know people are moaning right now because they're like, all right, too much Toy Story. But that room, my idea was you could be Andy's bedroom, and this is the one spot where you were the size of the toy. So all the audio animatronics were human life size and everything. You know, you walk in there and you're underneath the bed, and there's just like this massive area of space that you could put something really cool in. So for me, the other two I love the other 2 scenes. Don't get me wrong. There's just a limited amount of space what you could do in those sections, whereas Wizard of Oz, it's kind of a blank canvas and you could put something really cool in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if they really wanted to move, I guess, more towards Disney, you're not going to take out Mary Poppins. And plus, that's really tight, that area right there. So that's a good point.
And they technically own Aliens now as well.
True. That's true. All right. This is a simpler question, but I like it because it's kind of hard for me. What is your favorite roller coaster at Walt Disney World?
Space Mountain.
Yeah.
It was the first one I ever went on at Disney World. It was one of the first roller coasters I ever rode. I was terrified of roller coasters growing up, mainly because I could see them. I didn't want to go upside down. I didn't want to do this and that. Space Mountain, I thought was going to be like, the Tomorrowland TTA, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a nice, slow, leisurely ride because that's what most Disney rides are. I was very wrong about it the first time I rode as a little kid, but luckily it helped me break out of my shell and fall in love with the roller coasters. And to this day, I still love the thrills that you get on that one.
Oh, yeah. That was the first real coaster I rode. I think I was 8 or 9 because we went to Six Flags. It was Mid-America, but now it's St. Louis. And yeah, you'd see like they have like the Screaming Eagle there and stuff, which now I've ridden a lot. But as a kid, I was just like, oh, no way. You could see that. That's a big drop for a 10-year-old or something.
I still vividly remember it because my dad and sister went on it first. And they get off the ride, and I'm standing in front of like Delta Dream Flight and the current Buzz Lightyear. And my dad comes over, he's like, "You're not going to want to do this." I'm like, "Yeah, I am, Dad. My sister did it. I can do it." He's like, "You're not going to want to do this." I was like, "Yes, yeah, I will." He's like, "All right." And we went and did it. He didn't tell me it was a roller coaster right then because he knew for sure I wouldn't want to do it. But yeah, I had a nice, terrifying first ride on that one, but I've grown to love it.
Well, excellent. Me too. That was actually at the top of my list when, which is weird because there's things they could do better with it, but it's still the tops for me, just as far as my personal favorite. Okay. Who will have a better season next year? Tom Brady in Tampa Bay or Phillip Rivers at Indianapolis?
Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. He's got too many weapons down there. Chris Goodwin, Mike Evans, OJ Howard. They've just got a better weapons to work with. And I like Phillip Rivers, but his arm strength scared me quite a bit last year, and I'll stop there before I go down too far of a geeky sports route. So
I could start talking to you about Bruce Arians, and we can start going on about. We don't want to go too far, probably.
No.
All right. Well, that's probably what I would pick. I don't love Brady, but I agree. Rivers. Whew. All right. So which of these Universal, this is the total normal segue from Tom Brady to Universal, but here we go. Which of these Universal expansions are you most excited about? The unannounced Jurassic Park roller coaster, Super Nintendo World, or even more Harry Potter at Epic Universe?
Oh, that's tough. I'm really excited for Nintendo. I might know a little bit about the new Jurassic Park ride that might not be out there. That makes me very excited for it, but I'm going to lean because there's more attractions coming to Nintendo and just the one coming to Jurassic Park that I'm going to go with Nintendo. I'm very excited for Mario Kart, very excited for the Donkey Kong ride. The Yoshi ride seems very weird to me based on what they put out there about it so far. And yeah, that seems like a very odd attraction, but the world of Nintendo can be odd at times as well, so it might just fit in perfectly. So, yep, give me Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I would pick, though I am excited about all three, but it's kind of mind-boggling what they're going to do there. Okay, two more.
If they can pull off what I know about the Jurassic Park ride, though, I'm allowed to change my vote. I'll just put it like that. We'll talk about it after it opens.
Yeah, when they announce it 6 months before it opens or something.
Yep.
Okay, I have two more questions. The first one, so in the trailer for the Jungle Cruise, The Rock actually makes a joke about the backside of water. Was that amazing or painful?
Amazing, and I hope there's many more jokes from the script in the movie. I love it.
Okay, great. All right, last question. Very simple. Okay, so again, I like to play these if you were in charge kind of games, but if someone said, okay, we're thinking about some updates to how we do lines in the parks. We can either go back to all standby, no fast pass, no virtual queues, nothing. Keep our current setup, mostly fast pass plus across the board with standby, both. Or have no standby, do everything virtual, fast pass, queues, all of that. Which would you prefer?
I don't mind the virtual queue. I actually like the way it's done at Universal, where you get the little tickets. It's essentially the old fast pass system, to be honest with you. But if there was a way to do the virtual queue to where times were staggered throughout the day, where everybody didn't have to get there at 7 a.m. to get their passes, a certain number was given out per hour, so people had shots to get it that came later in the day, that would be my way to go. But until they can figure that out, I would probably have to just go with the current Fast Pass Plus system, put everything on that tier, let you book it, and if you don't book it, you hop in a standby line. That's I know people are like, they don't want you standing in a line for 5 hours, but I think it should be allowed, if you are wanting to do that, to at least have that option if that ride means that much to you to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unsustainable to always have it where you have to show up and then get out your phone, and you can show up and not make it. But there's a small part of me that's just like, get rid of the fast pass. It's all standby. But there is another part of me that says, hey, you'd probably really hate that when there'd be giant lines at certain attractions.
There is something nice about going on your trip knowing at least like those 3 rides per day you've got locked in. So it's not a perfect system. None of them's perfect. Yes, getting rid of Fast Pass would make the standby lines move that much faster. But again, we'd all be standing in standby. And that is something that Disney definitely does not want you doing. They want you out of those lines as much as possible and spending money in other spots. So
yeah, I agree. I think that's right. Okay. Well, Ben, again, this flew by. This was a lot of fun. I wrote a lot of questions, and of course, we didn't do a lot of them, which is great. But thanks so much for being on the show. If listeners want to catch up with what you're doing online or follow you, like where should they go?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at RealSkipperBen, and I have another account on there called Remember When WDW. I got to remember my own Twitter names. There's so much I'm doing right now. Where we look at some like classic and retro Disney clips, and basically just want to entertain everybody with a post per day. And you can also hear me on the podcast Marty Called. We put out an episode about once a month, as long as we can get Tim to step away from his job and actually sit in front of a microphone and record with us from time to time, which is fewer and fewer, especially during tax season. So if there's not a new episode soon, go blame at WDW Theme Parks on Twitter. It's all his fault. And you can also catch my top 10 columns in every issue of Attractions magazine. So I'm all over the place. I'm easy to find if you really want to find me.
Well, excellent. I've already got my mind rolling about the full MGM Studios episode. We'll get to that at some point.
I am down for that anytime. Just holler.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you should go and listen to the first episode with Skipper Ben, episode 63, plus a conversation that I loved with Ricky Brigante of Inside the Magic, episode 48. Both of them are at tomorrowsociety.com. If you'd like to help support the podcast, there is a great way to do so by becoming an official member of the Tomorrow Society through Patreon. You can leave a small monthly contribution to help keep the show going, receive some really cool perks, including access to the monthly Tomorrow Society Bulletin podcast, bonus podcast on Spaceship Earth, my favorite distinct attractions, and so much more. And you can learn more by going to tomorrowsociety.com/member. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Follow me on Twitter at TomorrowSOC or Facebook or Instagram at Tomorrow Society. The Tomorrow Society podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Dan Heaton. The music was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I am so excited to bring you episode 99. It's an Imagineering roundtable with multiple former Imagineers. It was incredible. You can catch that show next week. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you again very soon.